Hello, good evening. We are back with the SAPI IP Business Talks. And today we talk about open innovation and the IP in the digital era. I'm happy that we have three accredited guests today with us in the chat. Udo Gennari, Senior Project Manager from Business Upper Austria, Giovanna Paola Girardi. She is especially European Union trademark lawyer at Girardi Intellectual Property, and Russell Tom, Director Patents at Murky-Droid. I'm very happy that they are with us for the discussion, and whenever you have a comment or you want to ask a question, I'm very happy to pick that up and to ask Tobias. So, and now we come to Tobias. Tobias, Thank you very much for joining us this evening. You are an alumni of the master program, and you wrote a master thesis. So, first of all, when to start, just explain a little bit what you're doing, what is your background, and how did you came into that field of intellectual property?
Right. Yeah, thank you first for inviting me, of course, to the IP Business Talk. I was looking forward to participating. And yeah, something to my background, exactly. I was starting actually as a radiologic technologist. I was doing, let's say, X-ray pictures, images, running CT scans and doing diagnostic stuff. And then I was coming to the point this was the point where I'm entering into the world of IP. And I was starting, I think back in 2008, 2009. I was really studying patent engineering. It's quite exotically, I think, at the Amberg-Weiden University in Germany. Exactly. And from there on, I was working in different companies, and after my studies, different companies, organizations, research organizations. I was, for example, doing my diploma work. It's something German. It's between, let's say, bachelor and master at the Fraunhofer Institute for Silicate Research in Würzburg, especially in the department for smart materials. And after my thesis, I was working there to evaluate R&D outcomes and to work as a patent engineer, actually. Furthermore, I was also working, for example, for SEAT in their innovation and IP department as an IP manager. And I also was working in the area of universities. For Spanish Enterprise University Foundation, I was there building up from scratch an innovation hub, an innovation department. And since then, afterwards, I was really deciding to work as an independent IP consultant and patent engineer, to support SMEs, research institutions, and also to support founded projects. Exactly. And now I'm here, and today we are talking about open innovation and
Thank you, Tobias. And I would like to start with something out of your master thesis. So when we make this master program, so it's an option to writing a master thesis. It's not mandatory. So you did it. You wrote a very interesting thesis. So it's on our blog at the IP Business Academy. So the defending slides are available. And Tobias, you worked there about organization and management of IP infringement risks, and especially these infringement risks in the software development. And they're, again, very specific in the development in agile development environments. So can you explain us a little bit what is different there? So why is that tricky when it comes to agile development and we talk about infringement risks?
I mean, I think we have a different mindset there and a different way to create innovations when we are thinking on an agile development process. I mean, we have to understand that I mean, the normal way to create innovation is maybe by a waterfall-driven or stage-gate process. And yeah, due to the fourth industrial revolution, digitalization, I mean, companies are now more and more often adapting their innovation process to a more agile-like or more agile-driven process or development process. And I think it's important to understand thereby that it's an incremental and iterative process. And in this process, we have certain development steps that get revised and adapted repeatedly to different, for example, customer opinions and we get here really a response to different changes during the process. And I think it's really important to understand this. And a really important part of this agile development are also these cross-functional teams. Means that there are, for example, when we think now on the most common agile development process, it would be maybe a Scrum process, maybe where we have, for example, a product owner who's really lining up an backlog, how they call it, a product backlog with all the tasks what have to be developed during the process. And then we have one development team or more development teams that treating this product backlog and try to create increments, let's say outcomes during different sprints during the development process. Exactly. And there we have different also external participants, like, for example, the business owner who gives the money for the project, or different experts who are acting there inside doing the project. And of course, the customers, the stakeholders also to adapt and to improve the product or service step by step. Exactly. And yeah, it's when we, I mean, it doesn't have to do actually always with software. I think it's the agile development process could be also applied to in another way. And when we think now on IP risks, thereby can't only be or the freedom to operate status can't only be evaluated in one point of the innovation process. It has to be adapted continuously through the whole development, agile development processes. I think
so. What you're saying is that FTO, when I understand that correct, FTO is not a snapshot.
Exactly.
Let's say at the end of the development, you say, okay, and now somebody has to check whether we have FTO or not. So what you say, it's much more a process which has to be aligned with these agile development. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we have to establish, let's say, a freedom to operate status a long time the project. And yeah, and during my master thesis, I was also coming over the wording, not freedom to operate, not it's maybe better to say freedom of action, because we have so much IP risks. And we can't handle everything. It's impossible. So we have to evaluate what are the biggest IP risks, what are the most important IP risks, treat them first, and then look after the other ones, and when it's possible, and try to handle or this mitigation options during this.
Okay. So what I understand is you say first, FTO is a process and not a snapshot. Second, FTO is not a black or white thing, and yes or no, it is much more handling a bundle of risks. And third, you say it is not a thing, FTO is not a thing which can be tested in terms of it is there or not. It is something which has to be created. So you have to work for FTO, the project has to have that characteristic. So it's a burden which is on the project, and
Exactly.
FTO has to be created. Yeah, something like that. So these three
Yeah,
characteristics.
yeah, that's like that exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's quite a new interpretation of FTO in a digital era. And do you think that this approach is quite, let's say, common, or that companies really do something like that? I mean, that was not a part. So this empirical aspect was
Yeah.
not a part of your master thesis, right?
No, not really. But I don't think that companies at the moment are really applying this approach. I think they are still stick to this snapshot thinking much more than what we was discussing now. That it's more in process, and I think there we have to work a little bit on this idea. That we really think it is a process rather than a snapshot or a thing.
Yeah.
What we have.
And what you're saying is, when I got you right, is that especially the stakeholders, so the developers in the project, they have to take care, they have to create freedom to operate. And this is not a testing function of IP people, so to speak. So it is much more an interaction that they together. So we have IP expertise on the one hand, and we have the developers on the other side, and they together have to work to create freedom to operate.
Yeah, that's I agree completely on that. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's your thesis, so you should agree. But I mean, it's a very let's say different perspective from just having FTO, checking FTO. It's an IP thing, so the developers say that we have nothing to do with it, and so on. So I mean, that's a very interesting approach. I mean, what Udo Gennari right now writing in the chat is that, of course, mitigating risks come from different metrics, and of course it is nothing new in terms of risk management. But what you're saying from the FTO perspective is, I would say, something new in terms of having a process and not just having a snapshot, like in some other industries. Okay. Then Russell says that freedom to operate searches can be considered to a significant expense to SME, but it seems from your discussion that knowledge of the competitive landscape can also feed into the project development. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's an important thing what Russell says, that it is not just FTO in terms of are we allowed to do it? I mean, that's a very important information, but especially when it comes to software development, it's also very, very interesting who is active on the IP side here, on the patent side, and what exactly is the landscape. Is that something which you touched also in your thesis?
I mean, I was developing some kind of a layered approach, and where different IP rights, and especially patent rights, get evaluated, or let's say, like IP bundles, where we evaluated layered, like that we say we have a first layer where we say, okay, then we have no risk at all, and this could be some inputs, like from a landscape, we get to know of competitors, for example, that are acting in the same area, or of IP that are really valuable for us and free to use. And then we have our risk layers actually, where we really have to take care maybe of certain kind of patent rights or of open source or of, I mean, even of taking care of supplier components, that is also really something really important regarding also software development. And then afterwards, we have like some kind of a final layer where we really define everything and we see, okay, there's not so much risks there, and there's even some potential for us to gain exclusivity by IP rights. Yeah.
Okay. So this, I guess, it makes sense. So when I discuss in my next, I will make a short video to explain what this layer structure is and what this idea of bundles of risks means. To explain that to the audience a little bit. I mean, on Friday or early next week, I will do that. I mean, that's a very interesting concept. So Russell mentioned the SME. So let's jump to the next topic, which we would like to talk about, and this is the SME perspective, especially when we work together, when SMEs work with bigger companies together in for example open innovation projects. So then that's quite difficult, especially from an IP management perspective. And so what would you say, what are the biggest challenges in terms of IP when SMEs work in open innovation projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Henry Chesbrough who was defining first time what is open innovation. We all know it actually, that it's like opening our innovation process, and that in other technologies, IP and in innovation to improve our potential for new inventions and innovations, and on the other hand also to let out technologies and ideas and IP we are not using in other projects to support them and generate thereby exploitation outcomes. But open innovation in the context of IP, I think when we define this, we can understood it as a collaboration with another entity, and that this collaboration involves at least a sharing of background IP from the one side, of our own or of the company, and from the other side, of generating some kind of foreground IP during the project, that gets shared then with our partner or partners.
But you really, excuse me, Tobias, just that I don't get you wrong.
Yeah.
You think that it makes sense to share also background IP? Because I mean, I'm not that much in technology transfer involved, but my understanding from background IP was so far has been that this is a kind of shield, and I say this background IP is my one, and I don't want to share it anyhow, and I just talk about the foreground IP.
Right. I mean, it could be that some kind of collaboration only will be generated if the background IP maybe have some kind of importance during the project, and we have to use it, So then it's an important fact, and I think it's thereby, I mean, to enter already into the a little bit also in the problems for the SMEs. And thereby, it's also quite challenging to collaborate with different kind of organizational structures, like universities, bigger companies, research institutions, and I mean, everybody of them have different kind of strategic objectives,
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Of course, and we or an SME have their own strategic objectives, so we can come here to difficulties, And also
Yeah,
when we think now, for example, on IP openness, when we think now on university, the researchers are more likely to publish maybe anything, they are creating before asking us if this information or data have maybe more commercial value for us, So I think because of this organizational asymmetries, could be really difficult for SMEs, and of course
Yeah.
also other things like the risk tolerance of a bigger company when comparing with an SME or with a university, completely different, So thereby, of course, there we have a risk that opportunities for creating IP or due to the different point of view or mindset regarding openness regarding dealing with IP can lead to a loss of opportunities regarding the creation of foreground IP, and also exactly.
I mean, I agree 100%. So to a certain extent, I would say this has nothing to do with IP, because it's normal when you have cooperation partners, then two at least. So otherwise, it's not a cooperation. You need at least two, and but when you have more than two, it's even more complex. And
exactly.
and this is correct for each and every cooperation. But as you said, especially to a certain extent, the incompatibility that the incompatibility of the policies, of the risk policy, of the IP policy, when these partners come together, I mean, that's a huge burden on negotiation and on understanding for each other. I guess that is especially important for the SME part, to understand that these other guys, the bigger companies, as you said, with a different risk understanding and risk sensitivity, and on the other hand, universities with their different motivation. So that is really an issue to bring them together. So what would you say? Do they need a kind of manager, or is there a service needed? Is something out there? So what would you say? How can we overcome this specific challenge?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, it depends on the SME. By your own. I mean, we have different kinds of SMEs. They are better prepared regarding IP management, or don't have an IP management at all, and only acting with external parties. But I mean, it's important. I think that SME creates in-house expertise by external IP strategists. For the one hand, it could be one way, or on the other hand, by generating know-how by themselves, or maybe bring in an IP strategist into the IP management team, which are taking care, especially of these projects regarding also licensing and foreground IP, to really take care of how to create suitable IP protection during the development process, and also to take care about what gets published during the project regarding background IP, to protect the SME from this side also, So
I mean, that is what Udo right now wrote in the chat, that especially when it comes to software and digital developments, that there is a certain lack of knowledge. I mean, that is definitely what I can confirm from all my cooperations and teachings or whatever I'm doing with SMEs. And I mean, SMEs, in my definition, are up to 1 billion revenue. Even there is a characteristic lack on understanding how to patent, how to protect with patent software and software-based solutions. And as you said, Tobias, when it is not clear that can be patented, they have, of course, the problem to make clear what is the background IP. Yeah, so it is not patent, or what Udo says, or maybe having a preliminary patent application and declaring that as background IP. So that's really a characteristic issue that SMEs don't understand, so to speak, their know-how, and here they don't understand even the patentability, or don't know it simply, or have a misunderstanding on that, and then they have a characteristic disadvantage compared to the bigger company. So it could make absolutely sense to integrate anyhow an IP management function in such a corporation, to make sure that all the interests are taken care about.
Yeah.
So what Udo is mentioning is that maybe IP trainings can help. So I would say yes and no. Okay, so it's a typical reaction from us experts that we say, okay, others need training. Yes, awareness, but maybe we cannot make everybody to an IP expert. So a certain level of understanding is necessary, and then we have to be to support such structures. And I know that Business Upper Austria is doing like that, and Utopia is doing like that. So helping really very practical with that kind of characteristic deficiencies of the SMEs. But first of all, we need the awareness. So what do you think? How can we create that kind of awareness in such projects, that there is a characteristic disadvantage for the SMEs?
Yeah, awareness. I mean, I think it's really like this, is that I mean, they need somebody inside, and if somebody is inside of the IP management group who is taking care of that, I mean, it will be quite easy. But it's maybe really like that the lack of knowledge makes it maybe quite difficult to get aware of these issues, you know. So it's a difficult thing to get aware of that without external support, you know. So
Yeah. Okay. So so it's an open question to a certain extent. I mean, we have the offices, we have especially the supporting structures of the chambers of commerce and others. So in Austria we have, for example, the AWS, which is quite supportive for mid-sized companies. But yeah, it is very, very important that we create this kind of understanding, to this kind of awareness and level of understanding, that the SMEs don't give the gold nuggets away in such a corporation. Yeah. So the third thing, which I really like, what you came up with, is that you differentiate between IP specialists and IP strategists. So that's very interesting, because sometimes I'm saying there is nobody out there who we can call IP specialist, because that would mean that somebody knows everything about IT. And so we have also Giovanna Girardi in our chat, and so she comes from a different side. She comes from the trademark side, and that's also a very important topic. And so IP strategist is not patent strategist, obviously not. So what would you say? How can such an IP strategist support an SME when it comes to real, so down to earth, to economic success? What is your suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I mean, there are a lot of topics, of course, but I think the overall important topic is that an IP strategist is coming or looking at a IP from a business perspective, and is trying to understand really the strategic and the future plans of the company, and tries then to help them with their IP strategy based on that, and try to create exclusivity, the right exclusivity by IP rights. I mean, we are not there to really do the, let's say, unpatent or really doing the trademark or really doing the design right or really creating the trade secret policy. But we are there to create awareness about it and to start there the talking points and yeah, find there the right strategic points and the right mindset to then create a meaningful IP strategy that supports also the economic success of a company or SME. Yeah.
I mean, what you're saying, that reminds me to something which Bo Hayden in our, so we have this nice conference forum from HTB, the High Growth Technology Business Initiative from the European Patent Office, and there was a forum and a conference in Singapore, and Bo came up from Bo is from SIP in Gothenburg and Center for Intellectual Property Studies, and he came up with the issue that we should not talk anymore about IP management. We should talk much more about intellectual asset management, because he says when we talk about IP management, so then the asset IP is in the center of thinking, and that leads to a kind of legal discussion. Okay, because we talk about these IPRs and their characteristic and the limits of protection and enforcement and whatever. So more the legal aspect. But when we talk about and there's a danger lies therein that when you focus on the very complex legal issues, that you forget that you need this connection to business. Yeah. And it's exactly what you say between specialists and strategists, that especially when we talk about specialists and IP management, so that leads to a legal discussion, which is to a certain extent, which has the potential to be decoupled from the business discussion. And Bo says that we should talk about intangible asset management, because intangible asset means that this asset has to be used anyhow, integrated in the business model. So when I interpret you right, so you say we need IP strategists, and now I put Bo in and say we need IP strategists for intangible asset management. So quite difficult, but it's that is your intention, right?
Yeah, I think this is the overall intention, I think. And yeah, I mean, to advise, let's say, companies without a certain bias to certain, formal IP rights, to be really open to everything, and to give advice in any kind. When we think now on software, that we say, okay, you have to take care on open source. It's good when you use open source, but you have to take care that how is the license of the open source, when you combine it with your own created source code, but because at the end you have to publish it, or make it freely available, and the commercial value of your source code will be zero. So this is one example, to really take care on everything, and also to take care and think on trade secrets
but Tobias, sorry to disturb you, but I would not say that just because your code is public, the value is nil. Okay, so this is exactly. I mean, I just want to make that point, which means this is exactly a question about the business model. So and I mean that's a wonderful example. Whether this is good or bad, whether it creates value, that your source code is open or not, is a question of your business model and the interplay between exclusivity rights for bidding rights and the business model. I mean, that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I also think that we was coming from the discussion about open innovation projects, and I think that an IP strategist that also can be really helpful to really define your background IP and also define valuable forward IP. Also in bilateral collaboration projects. I mean, to really detect what is valuable regarding your business strategy, and then try to protect it, or make it exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I that's very interesting. What happens right now on the chat? So I don't want to saying something bad about patent attorneys. So that is not helpful. But I know what Udo means. Okay, Udo is saying we need independent consultants. And what he means, or advisors, and what he means with independent means having not an intrinsic favor for a certain solution, let's say.
Right.
And obviously the attorneys have a certain, let's say, intrinsic motivation at the end of the day to file or to prosecute or to enforce. Obviously, this is their job, their business. So, of course, there is a certain, let's say, tendency. It is a good reason also to have this other kind of advisors, for example, public funded advisors within the framework of Enterprise Europe Network or IPR Help Desk and so on. So offering advice, which is definitely not anyhow, let's say, biased, at least to a certain extent. I mean, this comes by nature that when you have a hammer, so the typical problem is a nail. Yeah. And I mean, I have 15 years of experience by teaching, training with patent attorneys. And yeah, that's a typical first reaction. Okay, so where's the invention? Okay, let's file. But quite often this is, let's say, this is not the only solution which exists, and we should be open to find a way to help companies really to create value. And that should be the first question. I have the experience that sometimes there is an underlying from both sides, from the patent attorneys or trademark attorneys, and also from the creative parts in the companies. There is this underlying assumption that once the patent or the trademark is filed, there lies a value in it. Yeah, also in terms of, as soon as we have the patent, things are better. The question is, what is changing then? And can the company explain why it is so important? Yeah, so I would say most patents are not infringed, and we can ask the question, why is it so? Okay, so we have another comment from Daniel, and he also says that there is a public structure, the help desks and helplines. Do you have experience with the help desk solution? Do you think that this is what the companies need, or would you say there is something different in terms of IP strategists?
I mean, the IP help desk. Yeah, I get in contact with the IP help desk. I mean, it's useful to get a basic understanding. And I mean, when you go to their homepage, they have a lot of documentation about IP and how is the process to protect, for example, your trademark and let's say the basics. And I think there's also some information about strategic management of IP. And I'm using actually the IP help desk, at least this information to, for example, educate or create awareness. For example, when I'm supporting EU-funded projects to create awareness between the participants, the partners inside, that they know, okay, this is how it's going on, and this is what we can maybe do, or if they have some questions, this is a really nice way to get information and to pass it to the participants. And I think they have also some kind of an IP helpline where you really can write them for free. I think it is, and it's a support service where you can write them for free and mail, and they are answering you. I think in between of 1 or 2 or 3 weeks. And they are trying to give you advice regarding some IP strategic question, and even if it's only to ask how much is it to apply for a trademark in Romania or whatever, So, but I never was actually using this IP helpline, I was using the IP help desk to get information. But the helpline, I actually never was using.
Okay, so you mentioned communication. I think that's so. When we associate the specialists with the attorneys and say, okay, they come from their legal expertise, so they typically need a quite specific interface to the company. So I would say the most comfortable situation is that you have a patent attorney on the one side and an inventor or a patent department on the other side. So when you have a certain, let's say, specific, very, very good interface, so to speak, between them that is very efficient. So what I saw with this, let's say, new inventors, okay, so, for example, the digital experts, UX experts, data scientists. So there are in this digital world, there are so many new job descriptions, new competency profiles. And I learned that they ask completely different questions from like patent departments or classical inventors from the classical engineering disciplines. So what would you think? Is it necessary to be able as an IP strategist to communicate with them? Is that a challenge?
It's a challenge, but I think it's key. It's important. It's really important to communicate, to understand them, to then transfer, let's say, the information to maybe the IP attorney, but it's really important to understand what they want to say, or to really transform their kind of thinking in maybe a use case, or to apply for the right kind of IP rights. So I think it's really, communication is a key topic, and it's important that we understand each other, and an IP strategist maybe can really be used to transform, let's say, the way an UX expertise is transforming then some kind of information into an invaluable information to create certain kind of IP rights that can be transformed by an, let's say, IP specialist into IP rights, IPR rights.
Okay. I mean, just a closing remark for this evening, for today. Alexander Gagnus says something which I like pretty much. He said we should distinguish the two questions. Can I patent it? So that is more or less the IP specialist question. And should I patent it? Okay, which is the more commercial aspect, which comes from, or should come from, an IP strategist. And then Russell says, yes, no. Both questions should, of course, be answered by specialists and strategists. Of course, I mean, that is the ideal. And what I would like to mention from my experience over the last 20 years in that field is that when an inventor thinks that he or she has something invented, or created, when we talk about trademarks and designs, when the creator thinks something is created and seeks for protection, the things are done. So then, from a psychological standpoint, you cannot ask this should question, because so then the creative guy would say, you are the wrong attorney for me, because I want you to fight for my rights. I want you to fight for protection, and don't ask me why I want that. I want that. So then the strategist is gone, so to speak. So. Yeah. I think it's much better to discuss this kind of issues before somebody thinks something is invented or created. Okay, Tobias, thank you very much. The time is over again. It's 5:45 here in Germany, and also. So where are you right now, Tobias?
Yeah, it's true. You was talking about it. Yeah, I'm living in Spain, in the northwest of Spain, in Galicia. Really nice place, close to the border to go to Portugal. I invite everybody to make holidays here. It's beautiful.
Okay, you offer bed and breakfast, right?
I mean,
okay, so be careful. Be careful.
Okay,
we have around 15,000 followers now, so be careful who you invite. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All. Thanks for your comments, and Tobias, you are available, I hope so, in the after show party on LinkedIn. In our chat, we discussed that. Some very interesting comments came up, so please stay there a little bit and answer and comment also there. So thank you very much to the audience, and I'm happy to see you next week with our next guest. Bye-bye.
Bye.